To really get the darkness that follows, you have to first see the light that came before it. This story starts not with a crime, but with a family living in a quiet small town. They seem to have it all, the type, the family you'd see at neighborhood barbecues, school functions, looking like a perfect picture of wholesome life. There was the hard-working father, a devoted mother, and their bright, smiling kids. Their life is just a collection of happy moments, the kind you expect to find in any family photo album. Weekends meant fishing trips, summer nights were for sitting on the porch swing, holidays were always a loud, happy mess of laughter and relatives. They were building a life that seemed totally secure and full of promise. Nobody in that community, not their neighbors, not their friends, could have ever guessed the tragedy that was hiding just beneath the surface. They seemed so normal, so safe. But one ordinary day, that picture perfect life was about to be torn apart for good. In a dusty pawn shop, sitting among forgotten treasures, was a tarnished silver locket. It was small, simple, and held a secret that had been kept for 2 decades. When that locket was finally pried open, it didn't just reveal a faded photo, it exposed the killer. This is a story of how one tiny object, sold for just a few bucks, unraveled a twisted tale of disappearance, betrayal, and murder, hiding inside what looked like the perfect family. It all started with a phone call that no one picked up, then another. A neighbor started to get that weird feeling in their gut when they noticed newspaper piling up on the porch and the family's car hadn't moved. A call to the police for a welfare check led a bizarre discovery. What officers found wasn't a crime scene, it was a mystery. The house was quiet, almost frozen in place. Breakfast was still half eaten on the kitchen table. School bags were packed and sitting by the door, but the family, they were gone. There were no signs of a struggle, no ransom note, nothing to explain what could have happened. The family had simply vanished. The first days of the investigation were a frantic blur. Police searched the woods and rivers nearby and interviewed anyone and everyone who'd seen the family recently. The whole community organized search parties, but as days turned into weeks, their hopeful faces slowly fell. The theory started flying. Did they run off to start a new life? Was it a kidnapping, or was it something much more darker? For all the effort from law enforcement, every single lead went cold. With no bodies, no real evidence, the case was eventually moved to the cold case unit, a thick folder filled with nothing but questions. And for 20 long years, that's where the story stayed, buried in a filing cabinet. The family became a local legend, a ghost story people whispered about. But one tiny piece of evidence was still out there, just waiting to talk. Now let's jump forward 20 years. In a pawn shop where the time seemed to stand still on the shelves, an employee was sorting through a new box of random items. That's when they found it, a tarnished, heart shaped silver locket. It was clearly old, maybe a family heirloom, but nothing about it really stood out. But curiosity is a powerful thing. Using a little tool, the clerk popped open the clasp. Inside, resting on worn velvet, weren't just one, but two faded photos. One on one side, a smiling woman, on the other, two young kids. The clerk felt a weird jolt of recognition. The faces felt familiar, like ghosts from a news story they've heard decades ago. They knew they had to call the police. When the detective showed up, he knew exactly what he was looking at. He was holding the first real piece of evidence in a 20-year-old disappearance. This wasn't just some old jewelry. It was a direct link to a family that had vanished off the face of the earth. The locket's journey to that pawn shop was a total mystery, but its reappearance was the spark that this cold case desperately needed. After 2 decades of silence, the investigation was officially back on. That locket didn't just give them a face, it gave them a thread to pull. For the lead detective, this was the one loose string that could unravel the whole thing. The first job was to trace the locket's journey backwards from the pawn shop. It was a long and winding road, but it eventually pointed them toward a person who had surprisingly had very hidden connection to the family. This new lead made investigators pull out all the old evidence and look at it with fresh eyes. They dug out the original case files, looking for anything that might have been missed. the first time around, and that's when they found them. A box of old home movies from the family's collection that had been sitting in an evidence locker for years. They converted the old grainy footage and started to watch. As they saw the silent films of family picnics and birthday parties, they weren't just looking for clues, they were looking for ghosts. In the background of one sunny family barbecue, they saw him, a man, always on the edge of the frame, who was written off as just a family friend during the first investigation. But now, with that, what they learned from the blockage trail, this man was suddenly their prime suspect. As detectives dug into his life, they found a history of lies and a motive as old as time itself, betrayal. Following this trail of deceit eventually led them to a remote abandoned quarry just outside of town. The kind of place where secrets go to be buried forever. The web of lies held together for 2 decades was finally starting to tear. Investigators brought the man from the home movies in for questioning. And at first, he was cool as a cucumber, denying everything. He was just a friend of the family, he said, just as heartbroken as everyone else. He stuck to the same story he'd been telling for 20 years. But the detectives didn't let up. They laid out their evidence one piece at a time. They talked about the locket. They talked about the hidden connections to the family. They mentioned the abandoned quarry. They painted a picture so clear that he had no room left to lie. As the hours passed, his composure started to crack. The weight of 20 years of guilt was finally too much. And then it all came pouring out. A confession. The story was a nightmare of chilling betrayal. The killer, once a trusted friend, had planned the family's end because of a personal grudge that had spiraled into an act of horrific violence. He walked investigators through the events of that day, leading them to the one place he was sure no one would ever look, at that abandoned quarry. Authorities uncovered the family's final resting place, bringing a devastating end to a 20-year-old mystery. The man smiling in the background of that family movie was the monster who had taken everything. Stories like this are a chilling reminder that evil can hide in the most ordinary places, and secrets can fester even in families that seem perfect. But it's also proof of the incredible persistence of investigators and the idea that no case is ever truly cold. If this story grabbed you, make sure you like and subscribe for more deep dives into cases that will definitely keep you up at night. In the end, justice was served. The killer was convicted and sentenced, finally held accountable for the lives he destroyed. For the family's remaining relatives and the community that had been haunted for so long, the discovery brought a painful kind of closure. The questions were finally answered, even if the truth was more horrifying than anyone had imagined. And it all came back to that one small object, a tarnished silver locket that held not just pictures, but the key to unlocking a terrible secret. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the quietest things in the world have the loudest stories to tell. You just have to be willing to listen.